microphone.
Okay. We're ready.
All right. I'm going to call the July 8th meeting to order. Can you give a roll call?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioners, when I call your name, just say aye or present. So Commissioner Amex. Okay. Commissioner Davis. She was originally going to try to participate through a remote participation policy, but I don't believe she's online. Commissioner Linderman.
Aye.
And Commissioner Mahan.
Aye.
Okay. Madam Chair, or Madam Vice Chair, you have a quorum.
All right, we're going to move to our first agenda item, which is the administration meeting approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Second on the approval of the agenda. We'll give a roll call.
Again, Commissioner Amex.
Aye.
Commissioner Linderman.
Aye.
And Commissioner Mahan.
Aye.
Okay. Madam Chair, the agenda passes.
Okay, now we'll move on to the approval of the minutes of our meeting on May 13th.
I move that we approve this.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the approval of the minutes. Roll call.
Commissioner Amex. Aye. Commissioner Linderman.
Aye.
And Commissioner Mahan.
Aye.
All right. Madam Vice Chair, the motion passes.
Great. Okay, we're going to move to our public comment period. My understanding that the request was made that anyone with comments should be filed. Do we have any comments to report?
We do not.
Anyone in the audience want to make any public comments? Seeing none, we'll close the comment period and move on to the policy administrator's report. Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, members of the Commission. Welcome back. This was what if I recall correctly, the Commission was actually one of the last state boards or commissions to meet before the pandemic. We're probably one of the first to meet since the pandemic. But since the governor's declared state of emergency was lifted on June 30th, all meetings have to be held in person again. But we're trying to do something a little different here, which is why we have this sort of hybrid version of the meeting with Google Meet occurring at the same time. So thank you, all of you, for your patience on this, and thank you to the members of the audience as well. Hopefully this is something that you're able to follow along. As far as staff updates are concerned, I wanted to make several announcements, and I will invite the people that I announced to provide some remarks to the Commission. But first, happy to report that Cody Anderson has been promoted.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you. I know you can't see me on the screen because I'm running technical on this operation, but I'm happy to be more of an integral part of the Commission on Local Government, and am excited to continue the work that we've been doing the last couple of years. So thank you, David, for the recognition.
You weren't already on the team. And then also happy to introduce you all to Grace Wheaton. Grace is on the line. Grace, if you would unmute yourself.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? I hear a few thumbs up from David. That's excellent. I'm excited to be here. I'm a senior policy analyst here with the policy team. I joined a couple weeks ago along with LeGrand, and I'm just very excited to get to learn more and to get to participate in this commission.
Welcome.
Look forward to meeting you in person.
And in person, we also have LeGrand Northpet, also joining the DHCD policy office. Grant, welcome.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is LeGrand. I also am a senior policy analyst with Grace, and happy to be here, happy to be at an in-person meeting, and happy to join y'all in the work.
Welcome.
Thank you. So that concludes my staff updates for the Commission. In addition to that, as you all know, Commissioner Reynolds' term expired at the end of calendar year 2020. Since that time, his seat has been vacant. It still remains vacant, but I understand that the administration has been working on filling this spot. If possible, an announcement will be made soon, so I will share that information with you all as soon as it's publicly available. Beyond that, in your packets, there were just a few news articles that I thought were a degree of local government interest. The first one related to Loudoun County's form of government. They're exploring changing their form of government, which would allow for the county to establish a police department. There's several different ways that statute allows for that to happen, whether it's through petition, referendum, or even a charter change. There are several counties in the Commonwealth, Chesterfield, for example, that have municipal charters, which establish powers above and beyond what's contained in general law. This comments by the board chair, Phyllis Randall, really spoke to a lot of what we've seen going on with accountability for a number of different local and state functions, including police forces. Currently, any county without a police department with public safety responsibilities would be exclusively through the sheriff's department, and there's no way for the county administrator in this example, or even the board of supervisors to have any sort of oversight over those operations. It's a separate elected official position. So this would allow them to achieve that. The matter is still being researched, and a report on the matter will be released in February of 2022. Also, another matter that actually kind of highlights some matters unique to Virginia local government structure is there was an article about the American Rescue Plan Act funding, and how I believe it was Senators Warner and Senator Kane advocated that Virginia's cities are rather unique and that they should not be treated exclusively as counties for purposes of ARPA funding. So Virginia's cities are receiving both funding as cities and funding as counties, because again, in many other states, a county function, for example, would be a school division. That is something that an independent city in Virginia also has to provide. So in the case of an example with the city of Richmond, they're receiving $110 million as a city, and then another $45 million as a county. So if they were shortchanged in either respect, you could see the significant loss of funding that could yield. There was another article as it related to the American Rescue Plan Act in relation to school capital needs and how funds can be used. Evidently, I've shared articles in the past where we've spoken about the condition of various school buildings in the Commonwealth and the need for new school facilities. And unfortunately, the ARPA does not allow for new construction. It only allows for retrofitting and renovation. So just something, perhaps that will change over time, but we'll see. There was an article from the Martinsville Bulletin about the reversion case that's before the commission. And then finally, another article on the Freedom of Information Act. Delegate Rome has stated some intention to amend FOIA so that FOIA requests are easier for the public and not as cost prohibitive. Essentially anything under 2 hours of time for staff to respond to would be considered free. But again, that's a policy proposal that hasn't been implemented yet at this point. That concludes my administrator's report. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, we'll move on then to our next agenda item, which is the notice of the City of Martinsville intention to petition for an order granting its town status within Henry County.
Okay, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Some of this will be sort of blended together, but what I'd first like to do is just provide a staff update. If you'll recall, at the May 13th commission meeting, virtual meeting, the parties indicated in their statement that they had reached an agreement in principle, and the commission consequently paused its proceedings so that that would allow the time for the parties to work out the agreement in principle, drafting an agreement, presumably a voluntary settlement agreement in the interim. The agreement in principle itself was crafted and developed into a memorandum of understanding that was jointly adopted by the governing bodies for Henry County and the city of Martinsville in a joint meeting held on May 26th. Afterwards, I suggested that the parties provide regular updates to the commission at their regularly scheduled meetings regarding their progress, and which would then be shared at future meetings. I also offered that some of the commission's review process could reasonably be abbreviated, given the commission is already somewhat familiar with the matter. We've been introduced to the parties. Some notices have been filed. It appears that there's a desire by the parties for the commission to conclude its review by early to mid-October of this year, to allow time for the special three-judge panel to be convened prior to the end of the calendar year. At this point, I'd like to read their statement for the record, which you can also see on your screen here. So counsel for Martinsville and Henry County are working through a draft voluntary settlement agreement that tracks the terms of the memorandum of understanding that was approved by the governing bodies of both localities at a public meeting on May 26, 2021. The parties have also agreed to target early October 2021 as the deadline for issuance of a final report from the Commission on Local Government. The parties will work together with the Commission to schedule mutually agreeable dates for the required steps leading up to issuance of the final report. With that, a mid-October is ambitious but could be done, assuming that the Commission can notice or the VSA from the parties within a reasonable period of time. For the sake of protecting and fostering positive intergovernmental relations between the parties, the Commission may wish to accommodate this abbreviated request. It will be to balance this abbreviated schedule that will be going to the special three-judge panel for review. Now, I'd like to refer to the PowerPoint slides. Hopefully, you can see this. If not, I know I sent this to the commissioners in advance of today's meeting, but essentially staff developed a review schedule timeline so that we can advise the commission and so that the commission can actually adopt its review schedule for these proceedings. And I actually need to pull up the PowerPoint on my laptop real quick here in just a moment, so I can see these dates more.
While you're going to ask a question.
Absolutely.
Can you remind me, the three-judge panel then convenes and renders a, and then it still has to go to referendum, is that true?
No, a referendum does not occur in the event of a reversion or a voluntary settlement agreement. Procedurally, from a general process standpoint, a voluntary settlement agreement is drafted, and there's a joint resolution by both governing bodies expressing support for the voluntary settlement agreement, and indicating that this needs to be brought to the commission for review. And then after the commission issues its report, it goes before special three-judge panel.
So that's the end.
At the
The
end.
three-judge panel decides it's appropriate for the town, for the city, town status.
Correct, but then it's a matter of implementation. So deciding, on what dates the reversion would be effective, how various locally administered public services would be consolidated, things like that.
In past reversions, I know we've had, 2 or 3 of those. Do we know a common thread as to the implementation date of those individual cases?
Not off the top of my head, no. And if I recall correctly, the memorandum of understanding that was executed by the city of Martinsville and Henry County in this regard speaks to the commission, or seeking the commission's guidance on what the effective date would be for this reversion. I believe there's 2 potential dates, but it could be something different. We don't have the notice before us yet. But those 2 dates are July 1st of 2022 or July 1st of 2023. So
And that was the only area of major disagreement between the 2 parties, right? Where they really couldn't come to a meeting of the minds. sounded like.
As far as the memorandum of understanding is concerned, yes, I wouldn't want to speak for them in entirety as it relates to any other disputes that there could be or there may still be. But as I understand, that is one aspect where the commission will need to weigh in. So again, what I've done is shared with you in advance 2 potential review schedule options. And really, I think staff's recommendation would be to do option 2. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through these a little more specifically. So what I've done in this table is outlined all of the various milestones that still have yet to occur in the commission's review schedule process, a potential date for that particular milestone, and some other just different metrics, and then some notes as it relates to that. So first and foremost, we don't have the notice filed with us yet, so that's to be determined by the governing bodies, and the date upon receipt of the notice could influence some of these remaining dates, but staff's recommendation would be to adopt the schedule as it stands now. This was also shared with the parties in advance of today's meeting so that they could identify any other dates that need to be blocked out. And I'm unaware of any. I am aware of at least one instance where some of their dates are a little firm. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So, of course, today is the scheduling meeting. Then there's a deadline for staff for follow-up questions, and that's normally just a standard review process where we receive the notice, staff does additional research, commissioners do additional research, or just analysis, and we synthesize our questions together and send them to the parties. That was already done in the case of the initial reversion notice. However, because this case is going to evolve from a typical reversion case or a straight up reversion case to a voluntary settlement agreement, I think it would be important for the commission to ask an additional round of questions. And one of the reasons I state that is because the standards for review for the case change between a reversion case and a voluntary settlement agreement. So that's the next milestone. Then we have the deadlines. It's more of a ministerial deadline, but deadline for the parties to respond and identify where the commission proceedings could occur when we're in the Martinsville, Henry County area, and then whether or not they desire to provide a court reporter. Once we have the location identified, we will need to provide public notice regarding the commission's proceedings, which are the oral presentations and public hearing. The earliest, what I've identified as the earliest date where we could issue that public notice in relation to when the actual oral presentations and public hearing occur. And this may fluctuate by a day or two. It really just depends upon the amount of lead up time that the Martinsville Bulletin needs for advertising that notice. But if I recall correctly, when Cody researched this last time, I think it was just a 48-hour notice.
That would be correct.
Is that a daily paper?
It is.
It is.
And the statute speaks to the public notice having to occur in a newspaper of general circulation in the immediate area. I think the Martinsville Bulletin might be the option in that area. Then we, of course, have a deadline for the parties to respond to staff's initial follow-up questions. In both scenarios, we're giving the parties 2 weeks to respond from when the questions have been sent. Again, that's rather condensed, but if the entire process is being condensed comprehensively, then this, by extension, would also need to be condensed. Oral presentations and the public hearing are scheduled for Tuesday, recommended to be scheduled for Tuesday, September 7th through, I believe it's, my screen froze, the 9th, yeah, Thursday, September 9th. A couple thoughts on that. One is not every day may be necessary for oral presentations. If you'll recall, when we worked on the Culpeper annexation case, that was done in an afternoon. Because this matter is now essentially going through the vehicle of a voluntary settlement agreement, it means it's not quite as contested, which means the parties may not need to bring in as many witnesses, cross-examination, opening and closing arguments. But I think it would still be a good idea for the commission to just block all of those days in its schedule. And of course, at the conclusion of presentations later, I think given the magnitude of this case, to a certain degree, a large auditorium space would be appropriate. Certainly also from not only from a volume perspective, but also public health practices. The emergency order has been lifted, but with things like the Delta variant still being a possibility, I think it would be prudent to socially distance if we can. And so the oral presentation dates and the public hearing date, and then by extension, the commission's regular and special closed session meetings, those are the pretty firm dates by one of the parties. So I don't think that there's much wiggle room here, unless there was a way to extend the reporting deadline or do something else, but not a lot of flexibility there otherwise. A week after the public hearing would be the closing of the commission's record. And so that's the closing of the commission's record allows for the parties to submit any final arguments they may have in this case. And then finally, it's also an opportunity for members of the public to still continue to issue public statements related to the case. And then once that's done, the commission will close its record, factor any of those additional matters into the draft report, which again, given the magnitude of this case, what we're recommending here is to have 2 additional commission meetings after the closing of the record. The first one would be Friday, September 24th. And that would be, again, a special closed session meeting. At that point, staff should have some version of a draft report ready for the commission's review and to solicit your input. And then 3 weeks later, on Friday, October 15th would be adoption of the final report. And so, I suppose that 24th date could fluctuate if necessary, but I just want to make sure that there's 2 opportunities for the commission to really think this through, again, just given the magnitude of the case.
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Sure.
Back in September, okay, there are oral presentations from the 7th, 8th, and then 9th, and then regular meeting on the 10th. So would we be there for Friday rather than for 4 days?
Mm-hmm.
Just wanted to make sure.
And that Monday is Labor Day, by the way.
It is.
Yes.
So yeah, there's some challenging holidays. I'm also out of the country the week before, so this is not the prettiest, most ideal, but with the extension deadline being what it is, this is how we've been able to fit this in with all the remaining milestones. I'm confident in staff's ability to do this. It's just going to be a little rapid fire.
We would have a regular meeting in November then.
That's right. And that meeting would need to occur anyway because of the mandatory property tax exemption study that the commission is also working on. That report is due September 1st. We're going to use a little bit of wiggle room and actually submit it the day the commission reviews the report and presumably adopts it.
I think it's a fair question of the parties to ask them how much time they think they need. And entering the whole hearing process for the premise that there basically is agreement on all points except the implementation date, I think it's a fair assumption that we're looking at maybe a more compressed period of presentation. Realistically, they could do that.
And as a follow-up question to that, are you, is that in relation to the oral presentations and public hearing proceedings? Okay. I can follow up with the parties. I think for now, I think it would just be a good idea for the commission to just reserve those dates on your schedule, and then we will work within that framework. And I think we'll have a better idea from the parties if they need those 3 or 4 days. Possibly no, when we've had voluntary settlement agreement cases in the past before the commission, those have also been, the oral presentations have been done in the day. It's a long day. It'll be, mid-morning through the afternoon, followed by a public hearing. But I just want to reserve those just in case.
It said that these 2 schedules have been shared with the parties.
That's right.
And so they're basically in agreement that they can make their side of the process work and reduce time.
That's my understanding. And again, I think the only, and I shared with them that option 2 seems to be the more preferable option from staff's perspective, and that's what staff would be recommending to the commission. Beyond that, the only other additional comment I had was those pretty firm dates for the oral presentations and public hearing.
Assuming the new members appointed in the near future, would you plan to involve that person in the case?
That's a good question. So there's, it's possible. I think one, I would ask that commissioner whether or not they would like to be part of the proceedings. We would also certainly need to make sure that there is no conflict of interest as it relates to this particular case. There's, I can't remember the statute. It's in chapter 29 of Title 15(2), but it prohibits members of the commission from engaging in any proceeding in which they or I believe members of their immediate family own property within the locality, or I think there's other sorts of financial interest matters that would need to be examined. So if we can confirm that that's not an obstacle, then I think it would be up to that commissioner. Certainly, there's also the need to bring that commissioner up to speed, not only on matters related to this case, but just onboarding them to the commission in general. And that could be a lot, depending upon their bandwidth at the time. So staff is prepared to do either option.
There seems to be merit if that person feels at all comfortable, you can bring it along, just because you just never know if somebody will fall out for whatever reason, and to have as many commissioners there that can vote, I think is a value at the end of the process.
Thank you for that. I underscore that. Any other questions or comments?
So I think what you're looking for today would be a motion to adopt a schedule.
Yes, that's correct.
One question, our missing commissioner today, has she weighed in on the dates?
Yes, I have. So the dates were shared with Dr. Davis. I did not receive any feedback from her on any dates that needed to be blocked or modified. And again, this was shared with her in advance.
And the parties are okay with these dates?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
All right.
So I'm looking for a motion to adopt staff's recommendation of schedule option 2.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Is there any further discussion? I'm hearing if we call the roll.
Okay. Commissioner Hammonds.
Aye.
Commissioner Lindemann.
Aye.
And Commissioner Mangan.
Aye.
Vice Chair, the motion passes. And now we'll turn it over to a virtual friend for discussion of fiscal stress. If she's still on the line.
Yes, I am still here, David. I am still here, David. So yes, hello everyone. It's again nice to meet you all. I'm Grace, to reintroduce myself. In terms of fiscal stress, I suppose in terms of updates to that project, the biggest one would be probably that I will be staff along with David and everyone else assisting with that report. But just to provide some updates given and following your May meeting, the most pressing one is probably that the city of Hopewell is still delinquent on their fiscal year data for fiscal year 2019 and their fiscal year 2018. Per the May meeting, the reasons for this delay are still the same. They point to COVID-19, turnover in their staff, and a transition to a new system to do so. And the dates for their annual financial reports currently are for their fiscal year 17 and 18 report to come out at the end of this month, their fiscal year 18 and 19 report to come out at the end of September, and then for their fiscal year 19 and 20 comprehensive report to come out at the end of December. Per staff policy, we have otherwise complete and comprehensive data, so we will use the most recent data that we have available to us in order to continue with the fiscal stress report, with the ultimate goal of presenting a draft to the commission at the September meeting. I will pause for questions now if there are any from the commissioners.
So theoretically, we are supposed to see something from Hopewell by the end of the month. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, in
You all
theory
are
we
supposed to
are,
see
but
something.
this
We may
was
not.
changed from May. So in theory, we are supposed to see something for fiscal year 17-18.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. And as the data, if more recent data becomes available, we will obviously incorporate that into the report.
Thank you. Okay, I don't think there's any action on this.
Just an update.
Yeah, so we'll move on to the special discussion of the general assembly.
Your agenda says that Cody and Grace will be doing this, but I believe Grace will be working on this.
And Grace,
Yeah.
do you mind speaking just a little louder?
Oh, of course. My apologies. I'm so sorry. Is this any better?
It's a little better.
A little better?
We're just farther away from the speaker.
No, I understand. I will try and speak up as much as I can. So Cody will catch me if I miss anything, and I'm sure Kristen can jump in too if I do miss anything regarding special session. But per a June 23rd press release, special session is set to begin on Monday, August 2nd. The two priorities stated that are going to be done during this session are appointing appellate judges and also allocating of ARPA funds. So Virginia has received over $4.3 billion in American Rescue Plan Act relief funds, as David mentioned earlier regarding the city of Richmond. Many of the priorities stated for the special session directly apply to DHCD. So that includes public health is something that the special session will focus on, and they point to housing and utility assistance. And by they, I mean the governor's office. They also call out small business assistance. And so they directly name the Rebuild Virginia and DHCD as partners for this funding. And then finally, broadband, which is eligible expenditure under ARPA along with water and sewer changes, but that is one of the few ways in which you can spend these relief funds on infrastructure. So we expect for broadband to be a focus of this session and major investments in that. We come into this special session and with these relief funds from a strong position of fiscal strength as a state. At the last House Appropriations Committee, Secretary Lane, the Secretary of Finance, mentioned that we are expecting to come into the next fiscal year with over a $1.5 billion surplus. So we will see what are done with these funds, but it will be interesting. Was there a question there? My apologies.
So it's my understanding that their interim final rule on the expenditure of the money isn't included, or public comment isn't included until September. So I'm assuming the General Assembly is making their decisions based on that interim final, and Not to say that it will change, the rules change, but.
If I heard your question correctly, they are making the allocations of those relief funds based off of that interim period.
Yes.
Probably, yes. There is no requirement that all the funds be allocated during this special session. So we will see if they choose to do so or not, or if they choose to push it off into the regular session in January.
Got it. Because they get half of it this fall and another half
I think
a
that's
year
right.
from now. Something like
They
that.
could do that. There's a pretty long deadline to expend these funds, but we will see what the appetite of the General Assembly is to allocate these funds. One of the points I wanted to make is we don't know how long the session is going to last. And we don't necessarily know what's going to come up yet. As of today, there were no bills pre-filed. We do expect for this to be a reasonably slow session legislation-wise, and we expect most of the action to happen, if any, in the budget. But we will, of course, announce to our fiscal impact statement volunteers that we may expect and we may need their help. But it's a lot of is yet to be determined at this point.
Any questions of Ms. Wheaton on her report? Okay, thank you.
Of course.
All right, now we are on our report or update on the mandatory property tax exemption.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, members of the commission. So there was a stakeholder group that has been assembled for this study. It's met once. Obviously, the commission again also had a public hearing. I believe that was its May commission meeting, soliciting initial input from localities and other interested parties on mandatory property tax exemptions in the Commonwealth. One of the next steps was to initiate a survey of every city, county, and town in the Commonwealth on various quantitative and qualitative matters related to these property tax exemptions. That has been sent out. It was sent out actually 2 weeks ago. That's a 3-part survey. It asks questions as it relates to real property tax exemptions, personal property tax exemptions from a forecasting perspective, and then finally state-owned property within the local jurisdiction. These questions were vetted by the stakeholder group and representatives from DACO and DFL. So we were very comprehensive, and Grace and Cody and Kristen have all been also very helpful in helping fine tune this before we send it out. We've received 16 responses so far, so 5% of the total pool of all local governments in Virginia. Responses are due July 21st, so 2 weeks from yesterday. As far as next steps are concerned with this report, one, we're obviously going to compile the survey results and conduct other research. Cody's also been very helpful in looking at practices in all 50 other states as it relates to these types of exemptions. We're going to summarize recommendations from the public hearing. Staff would also develop its own recommendations based upon what we've read, what we've researched. Then conduct another stakeholder meeting to digest all of this information, refine those potential recommendations, report on that outcome of that stakeholder meeting to the commissioners at the following commission meeting. Then discuss a final set of recommendations and again, have the commission adopt its draft report at its November 4th meeting, which is reasonably close to the November 1st deadline. I think that's everything from my notes on that. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
And this was a line in the budget.
That's right.
Which
Yeah.
is a center. Any questions from? All right, let's go over here. That comes to November. All right, moving on the agenda. Are there any other issues that need to be raised during our meeting today? I do have one question. We adopted, I think at our last meeting, resolutions, which we signed. Is there a plan of delivering those resolutions?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Vice Chair, for the question. And yeah, I suppose that wasn't on my radar for today's meeting, but I think what I could do is, especially if the commission is going to be in the Martinsville area, yeah, it's a shorter drive for, yeah. So why don't I try to get that on the schedule for the September meeting, and then with Ali's family, two options. We could also invite them to the November commission meeting. They live out in Short Pump, so just be more reasonable. Or I'm happy to, along with the rest of the staff, visit their house and present the resolution to them in person. I suppose we should really make it their option.
We could ask them what they're looking for.
Sure. And I've been in contact with Ali's daughter several times over the course of the last few months, and so I'll just engage with her.
All right. Okay. Schedule of regular meetings. Well, our regular meetings aren't anymore. Seems like we have a lot of meetings on the schedule.
Sure, and I'm not going to go over the rather comprehensive schedule that we've already adopted today. So in terms of regular meetings for the future, we have the September 9th, 2021 meeting, and then the November 4th, the aforementioned November 4th meeting. So there's the upcoming regular meetings of the commission.
Barring no additional sudden pandemics occurring, those will be held in person and at 11 a.m. And we will try again to coordinate these through this virtual option.
And just out of curiosity, is that going to be a practice for the state moving forward to have hybrid meetings?
That's a good question. So there was a news article that talked about that very topic. I think DEQ and one other agency had board meetings almost immediately after June 30th. And there was a tremendous loss in terms of public engagement at those meetings for folks to have to drive all the way to Richmond for something they could otherwise view virtually. So that was the purpose of us doing this today. I know there's been discussion about looking at this and opening up public meeting law to see if there's a way to accommodate this hybrid. I guess today kind of proves that we can do it. It's a little bit of a scramble. We probably need to invest in some more equipment, but it can be done.
David, I know at one time you were considering offering to the General Assembly a reduction in meetings per year of the commission based on recent years' workload. Are you still thinking of that?
I have brought that up again. I know that the last time I raised it was in the middle of the pandemic, and I think there wasn't an appetite at that point in time. I will certainly echo that again with our director and see where that goes. But he is aware that has been suggested and
I guess if anything is going to get done in the General Assembly, that would need to surface in the next couple of months.
Right.
Does it take them into the next one?
It does. There's somewhere within Chapter 29 of Title 15.2 speaks to the commission having to have 6 meetings a year, and then by extension, our regulations also speak to that.
And so many events of interest.
Sure. There were 3 that were on my radar, and you hear me echo them every time, but I'll go over them again. The Virginia Municipal League's annual conference is going to take place in October. That's from October 3rd through the 5th. The Virginia Governors Housing Conference will be taking place from November 10th through November 12th this year. And then the Virginia Association of Counties annual conference is scheduled to take place from November 14th to November 16th. and they all look like they're going to be in person. So kind of back to normal. And that's all I have on my list.
I have nothing left on the agenda, so I can take a motion for adjournment.
Second?
Motion and second for adjournment.
Commissioner Ennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Mann.
Aye.
And Commissioner Littleman.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.
You're still recording, so just everybody, please wait just a